Yes, you're on the right channel. It is DBA710, Management and Leadership Approaches, and this is Week 5 assignments. I just decided that since we're halfway through the class and looking towards the goal line at the end, change the music, and no, that's not me behind those shades. That's a young version of Tom Cruise. However, we know what we got to do. We've got to do some reading this week, and now we're moving on to a different set of theories called the contingency theories of management. And contingency means that the research now looks at the situation that management is occurring within. So the systems theories gave us the idea that the organization and management occurs not in a vacuum, but actually in a complex system related to other systems. And the contingency theories then say, well, maybe we ought to look in more detail at what those different factors are and look at perhaps the way you manage should depend upon the situation that you're in. And of course, we'll have an assignment that allows you to write a little bit, or discuss a little bit, write a little bit, and then discuss a little bit about the contingency theories. And again, we're always looking for how they fit in this evolution of management research. So don't just describe what the theory is. Tell me how it relates to systems theories, how it relates to the human relations theories, how it fits into this overall picture that we're painting about management and the way it's evolved from the early classical theories of Taylor and Fayol and Weber. The other thing I wanted to talk about in this particular class, since I introduced it last week in the required post response question, my thread, is the idea of streams of literature. Now, some of you wrote some very astute and accurate portrayals of what a stream of literature is, and one of the things that we've done recently with the DBA program is we have started using more literature, and I think the DBA700 class, your first class, actually has you develop a stream of literature. So this should not be entirely new material. For those of you who don't remember it or haven't had it, this is very useful, because when it comes to writing your dissertation, you have to be able to do literature reviews, which requires understanding what a stream of literature is. So let's get to basic definitions. It could be anything related to a particular subject. It could be research papers, the types of articles that we're reading from the journals. It could come from books. It could come from conferences, working papers, anything about a particular subject. However, as you've learned, some of the information, some of the research is more highly accepted and carries a higher validity than others. So generally we try to pick peer-reviewed journal articles as our basis of our stream of literature. However, in the early days, back in Taylor's time, there weren't any journals to publish in, at least in the field of management, and so he had to basically write books and do speeches and go to conferences to market his view to the world. So it depends on what you're working in. If you're working in a brand new field that there's no readily available journals to publish in, you may have to write your own book about the subject. But generally, the subject of a stream of literature is based upon well-accepted theory. It has a history, and as I said, it's usually written up in peer-reviewed articles, peer-reviewed journals. That's the gold standard. When things come out of trade journals or non-peer-reviewed journals or blogs or opinion pieces, and with the internet, there's a multitude of sources of information, and so question is it somebody's opinion? Is it something that's been proven? Is it something that has a degree of truth to it or not? And consequently, peer-reviewed is about the best we have, especially from the top-notch journals. Now, the reason that this is important, of course, is when you get to your dissertation, and it will actually start before you actually write the dissertation, you'll be required to write literature reviews to kind of give you practice about first researching the library and being able to find journal articles related to a particular topic, and then learning how to write it up. So when I refer to your papers and I give you feedback and I say, stay focused, stay within the literature, don't get off the subject, try to condense, try to synthesize. This is all preparing you and teaching you how you're going to write your lit review when it comes to your dissertation. So the lit review generally tries to stay focused within a stream of literature. Now, sometimes this is difficult, and I've made comments before about this, because the tendency is to include everything you know about a particular subject or everything you can find about it. So technically the subject could be almost anything for a stream of literature, as long as it has some sort of a theoretical basis. So, for example, if we were talking about leadership, you might say, well, I think a dissertation about leadership would be great. Well, when you go in and you do a search on leadership, you'll find that there are millions of articles that are written about leadership. And you'll find that there are many subcategories of leadership, many different theories of leadership that you would have to follow. So we want to stay out of the ocean of literature, and we want to find a particular stream that has what we want to work with. So you don't want to start doing a literature review of millions of articles. You want to do one that has a substantial body of work, but that you can actually cover within your lifetime. So some things have too much literature, and some things have not enough literature. I had a student recently who was interested in doing a dissertation on social media. Sounds good. You would think that there would be some interest and some research done on the subject, but the problem is, in terms of the publishing cycle, not enough has been written to develop any particular theories that now have a basis in and can actually be looked at as a stream of literature. So it's, in a sense, it's so new that there's nothing, at least in the management field, that you can connect to. Okay, so it's got to have a history. It's got to be traced to something. So let's talk about it in the context of the Mississippi River and all its particular tributaries. We're talking about streams. And because this is management, we're going to talk about management theory as a stream of literature. And in this class, we've started out from the headwaters with Taylor and Fayol and Weber being the classical theorists. And then we moved on a little further downstream, and Mary Parker Follett and Mayo, Elton Mayo, and Maslow all contributed to the human relations excuse me, part of the management theory. Again, we're working with a flow of literature, and as we move into the next phases, the systems theories, we did some reading on Miller, and we saw Boulding referred to, and Herb Simon. So all these people will build upon the previous work, and they're all contributing to this flow of literature, what we might call the stream or the Mississippi River of literature. And as we move forward into the contingency theories, we'll see Lawrence and Lorsch and some of the others. Now, of course, this is a huge body of knowledge by this time. And I just want to look at one particular author, Herbert Maslow, and see where he, remember, he contributed to the overall body of management theory. His particular contribution was in the motivational area, and he talked about the hierarchy of needs. So Maslow was a major contributor, but Maslow also sprouted a bunch of theorists that followed his work. So there's the Aldolfer ERG theory, there's Max Neef, Hertzberg did work with motivation, the hygiene and the motivator components of motivation, the Murray systems of need, Juan Antonio Lopez, McGregor with his theory X and theory Y. So, the literature just doesn't stop at one point. You can see that it builds off previous theories, and people come up with new ideas and develop their own theories. Another way to perhaps look at it is what I call the tree of literature rather than the stream, because it gives you more of an idea that we're always building upon something, the roots of a theory, and we're spreading into the branches and leaves of the theory. So again, let's look at contingency theory, which is our subject for this week. Well, contingency theory is built upon the classical theories of Taylor and Fayol, Weber, and others. It's also built upon the human relations theories of Follett and Elton Mayo and those people, and the systems theories also. So all these were predecessor, and contingency theory has its roots in the earlier theories. But then, of course, it doesn't stop there. Out of contingency theory came the ideas of SWOT analysis and ideas of the importance of organizational culture in management and leadership theories and game theory and strategy and global management and stakeholder theory. And some of these we'll be talking about in our upcoming weeks, but contingency theory was not the end of the story. Again, it was just the next chapter that additional theories and approaches were built upon. So if we take one of these particular branches, for example, stakeholder theory, and we see what happened there, well, stakeholder theory is generally accredited to R. Edward Freeman as the first originator of the theory, and Charles Blattberg was a critic of it, and other people all wrote their particular literature to go along with it, developed their own theories, some support of the basic stakeholder theory idea, some adding on to it, some enhancing it. But again, it's an idea that a certain theory at one point in time becomes the basis for future theory and future work. And this again defines what we call a stream of literature. So if you go to a normal university and you look around at all the different buildings, you'll see labels, titles on them. So you may have the natural sciences school, the engineering school, the humanities school. Business is usually put in the social sciences area, along with psychology and anthropology and economics. And then as we break business down a little further, we have specific areas such as marketing and management, finance and accounting. Then within those, for example, within management, we have specializations. So we have specializations in organizational behavior, strategic management, leadership, and so on. And then even within the field of, say, strategic management, within that specialization, we have different schools of thought. We have Mintzberg's design school, and we have Michael Porter's 5 forces school, and we have Jay Barney's resource-based theory school of strategy. And it goes even further. Suppose we take Michael Porter's view of strategy, and within that, he had one of his sub-theories was one of strategic groups. And within strategic groups, maybe you'd talk about emerging markets, strategic groups within emerging markets. And the whole idea here is, as you think about topics for a dissertation, as you think about specific research, you have to boil it down to a very narrow component of an existing theory and the literature that deals with that specific topic. Okay, in emerging markets, you might say, well, what are you talking about? Are you talking about South American markets? Are you talking about Asian markets? Are you talking about African emerging markets? So even within there, you might need to get more and more specific as you think about a particular area of research. So the whole idea is learn to become very focused when you're doing your papers and doing your discussions. Narrow down the topic. Don't broaden it out. Narrow it down. And just as a few comments about dissertations, she's saying she's going to write her dissertation on latte sizes. And he wants to write his dissertation on Baywatch. Why not? So the keys to success for this week, going back to Bloom's taxonomy that I introduced last week, we're not just looking for a description of the theories, we're looking for comparisons, we're looking for similarities, we're looking for integration between the ideas. Look for the underlying DNA. What connects these things together? How can people who are very smart and study this, how can they come up with different ideas? How are they related to the other ideas? There will be divergent viewpoints. Some people will write that they disagree with so-and-so's theory, something that's been in textbooks for 50 years. Somebody will write and say, this was never really proven. Well, as you know, the reading gets a little bit heavy to get through in just a couple of days. So as I've suggested, pick a couple of the articles, scan through them, download them all, scan through them, look at the abstracts, decide which are the ones you want to use for your initial post. And then during the rest of the week, continue to read the articles, continue to look at the discussions and see what you can add based upon the additional readings. So by the end of the week, you should have read and written everything about everything. But for the first initial post, just make sure you've covered whatever the basic topic is. There's going to be a reading in there that seems to do a very good job about identifying what it is and who the main contributors were and how the theory developed. That's what you're really looking for. And of course, this particular week is connected to the other weeks, the past weeks, and connected to the future weeks. So try to use the sources from previous weeks to add to this week. Show how the writings from the systems theories relate to the contingency theories. There's nothing wrong with reusing a source from earlier. Okay? In fact, I'm looking for that because it shows that you're making the connection between these different ideas. And as I said, we're reached the halfway point, and it's all downhill from here. So until next time, goodbye and good luck.